All right, welcome back to ABA exam review and our latest RBT exam practice series, where we're going through the next set of questions together and breaking them down. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Please like and subscribe. Check out btexamreview.com for all of our study materials, including our combo pack. As always, when you pass, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. Let's get going. 2 years ago, you received a speeding ticket while driving on the highway. Today, you are driving on the same highway and see a police car which causes you to slam on your brakes. The cop car is a what? For behavioral questions, when we're talking SDs, MOs, consequences, antecedents, reinforcement, anything of that nature, we always need to work to identify first, what are we looking at? Well, our target of interest is the cop car or the police car. So let's identify what the police car is doing in this situation, right? So you're just driving on the highway. You see the police car, which is the antecedent to slamming on your brakes. And now, why did you slam on your brakes? Well, 2 years ago, you received a speeding ticket driving on the highway. So 2 years ago, you saw the police car, you continued speeding, and you received a ticket. So you were punished. Now, how do stimuli, like a police car, gain properties of SDs? How do they become discriminative stimuli? Well, in the presence of those stimuli, the behavior is either reinforced or punished. Think about when we're teaching something like colors. When I say point to green and the client points to green and I reinforce for pointing to green now signals reinforcement is available. In this case, seeing that police car now signals to you that positive punishment is available, because in the past, your behavior of speeding has been positively punished. So what do you do instead? Well, you slam on your brakes. And by slamming on your brakes, you've avoided the ticket, negative reinforcement. Okay. So the police car signals, well, positive punishment is available if you continue speeding. So what do? You slam on your brakes and you avoid it, negative reinforcement. So the cop car is a what? SD for positive reinforcement. Well, it's not an SD for positive reinforcement, right? Because the response is you slamming on your brakes, and the consequence is avoiding or escaping the ticket, which is negative reinforcement. What it's really signaling to you is there's positive punishment available. If you see the police car and you continue speeding, the result is most likely that you will get a ticket. You will be positively punished for your behavior. The police car is not a consequence. It's an antecedent to this behavior. And it isn't a prompt, right? We have an antecedent and then a response. And this is whatever your response is. If you continue speeding, the consequence will be positive punishment. If you slam on your brakes, the consequence will be negative reinforcement. So ultimately, the cop car is signaling positive punishment is available. 2, the Vegas Golden Knights are playing Friday night, and Dave wants to go. Dave's dad tells him if he mows the lawn, then he will bring Dave to the game. Dave's dad is using what type of intervention? So we've got the Golden Knights playing, and we're looking at Dave's dad's behavior. We know Dave wants to go see the game. So Dave's dad, who we're looking at, tells Dave, mow the lawn. If you mow the lawn, then I will bring you to the game. It's an if-then statement, which is a contingency. So we've set up a contingency. And now what kind of contingency? Well, Dave's dad is saying if you engage in a less preferred response, right, a less preferred than going to the game, I will allow you to engage in a highly preferred response as reinforcement. So what intervention allows the learner to engage in a highly preferred response after engaging in a lower preferred response? A, Premack principle. Yes, this is grandma's law, right? If you eat your vegetables, you get ice cream. If you mow the lawn, you go to the game. Premack principle says if you engage in a lower preferred response as reinforcement, you can engage in a highly preferred activity, which is the case here. Dave's dad isn't shaping because there are no approximations of behavior. We're not building up to this. It's a simple contingency. It isn't a high P request sequence because Dave's dad hasn't given him multiple high probability requests in a row. He's just, again, set up a simple Premack principle based contingency. And there's no functional communication training. He's not teaching Dave to communicate anything. It's simply, I will, as reinforcement, you can engage in your highly preferred activity, but first you must engage in this lower preferred activity. So if then. Remember, high P is kind of the reverse, right? It's all these high probability requests where there's a good chance you're going to engage in those, and then I give you a low probability request. With the pre-map principle, it's, well, I'm gonna make the high probability activity, your preferred activity, contingent on you completing the lower preferred activity. So Dave's dad is using what type of intervention? Well, A, pre-map principle. A piano teacher, is giving a group lesson to some second graders. She tells the children that they will now learn to play Mary Had a Little Lamb. Teacher then says, play a C chord, and plays the C chord. What type of prompt is this? All right, we have a obvious prompt question. Okay, so we're looking at whose behavior? Well, the teacher. She's the one prompting. So we know she's giving a group lesson. She tells the children they will now learn to play Mary Had a Little Lamb. The teacher says, play a C chord. So that's our SD, right? So in prompt questions, you want to identify the SD because the prompt will always follow the SD. So we know play a C chord is our SD. So the teacher playing the C chord is the prompt. So what has she done? Is it a gestural prompt? Well, it's not a gestural prompt. A gestural prompt is pointing or indicating or motioning towards what she would like them to do. She's actually engaged in the response and demonstrated that response. So since she's demonstrated that response, she's modeled. It's going to be a modeling prompt. It's not an imitation prompt. Don't confuse modeling and imitation. Modeling is what the teacher's doing. She's demonstrating. Imitation is what the learners are going to do. Okay, so the teacher models, the learners imitate. This is a modeling prompt. And it's not a partial physical. She's not physically engaging in the activity with the second graders, right? She's simply modeling what she wants. I say, touch green, and then I model touching green. Teacher says, play a C chord, models playing the C chord. Ideally, the response will be the second graders play that C chord. So what type of prompt is this? Well, modeling. Look at the graph below. What was the frequency of the clients screaming for session 3? So we're looking at this graph. We're looking at frequency of clients screaming for session 3. Now, don't be intimidated by graphing questions. You just need to do a few of them and understand the basics of the graphs, right? So we know x-axis represents time. Our y-axis represents our behavior. This is our title, rate of client screaming, which is going to tell you the type of measurement here. Okay, so we know we are using rate, and then we have our data paths and our sessions. So we're looking at session 3, which is here. Now, if we go up to our behavior and go across, we have 5 for screaming. And what do we know about rate? We know rate is frequency over time. So we have our time down here, just 3 hours. So our frequency must be on this y-axis, how many times the behavior occurred. And we are looking at the frequency. It says we're measuring rate, but we need to find the frequency. So to find frequency, all you do is take time out of rate. So if our time is 3 hours and our frequency is 5, the rate would be 5 times per 3 hours, but the frequency would simply be what? Well, 5. Don't make the mistake of confusing frequency and rate. They aren't the same thing. They're used interchangeably quite often, but they're different. Frequency is just count, and that's what we found, just to count. Rate has this per hour. It's got this time component. We don't need the time component here. We only need the count. When you arrived at your client's home on Thursday, you suspected that you might have smelled alcohol on the parent's breath. What should you do as a behavior technician? All right, kind of an ethics question here. A tricky situation, right? Because we know we are mandated reporters, meaning if we suspect abuse, we have to report it immediately. Now, this is kind of not a trick question, but you've got to think critically here, okay? You arrived at your client's home on Thursday. You suspected you might have smelled alcohol in the parent's breath. At no time does it say the morning or what time it is or what's going on, or they could be throwing a party. It could be a night session. Who knows, right? Parents drinking alcohol is not illegal. It's not abuse. It's not anything negative given what we know. All we know is you went to the client's home. and you smelled alcohol on the parent's breath. Again, what if it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon? What if they're throwing a party? There's a lot of ifs here. So you have to be careful, right? There's no sign or indication that anything is going wrong. So, however, you did smell alcohol on the parent's breath. Maybe that raised an alarm. So what do you do as the behavior technician? A, asks the parent if they have been drinking. Well, you don't want to do that. That's not your place, right? Your place as the technician is implementation, okay? B, report the parent to child services. No, there's not enough here to constitute that. We've got to suspect abuse, and there's not really abuse at play here, right? Or negligence, okay? C, inform your supervisor as soon as possible. Yes, that's the best course of action. You simply let them know what you observed, what you saw, and let them take it from there. And then D, leave the home immediately. Again, all we know is you went to the client's home on Thursday, you smelled alcohol in the parent's breath. There's a million reasons that could have been why you smelled alcohol on the parent's breath, and a lot of those aren't malicious or bad. When answering questions, you have to just use the information given and pick the best answer based on the information given. Based on this information given, there's no reason to suspect foul play or harm here. So all we want to do is just inform the supervisor as soon as possible, just so they know and they're aware of this situation. To implement a variable ratio 5 schedule for Jason answering questions correctly. Janet says, okay, so I give him a token every 3 to 5 responses, right? Is Janet correct? Now, let's think about this. You've got to put on your analytic cap here and think about what Janet is asking. So we know we are on a variable ratio 5 schedule. So what does that mean? Well, that means every 5 responses on average will be reinforced. Variable means on average. Ratio means responses. And 5 indicates the amount. So every 5 responses on average will be reinforced. So Janice says, all right, I'll give him a token every 3 to 5 responses, right? Well, is that correct? No, because why? Well, she's supposed to give it every 5 on average. That can be reinforced after 2. It can be reinforced after 10. As long as in the end, it averages out to 5, that's all we're looking for. So is Janet correct? Yes, Janet is correct. No. B, no, Janet should give a token every 5 responses on average. Yes, that's what a variable ratio means. Every 5 responses on average. C, no, Janet should give a token every 5 responses. That would be a fixed ratio 5. And then D, cannot determine. Well, we can determine. Janet is implementing a variable on average ratio responses 5. 5 responses on average will get reinforcement, not every 3 to 5 responses. So is Janet correct? No, Janet should give a token every 5 responses on average. At work, Marcus is quiet, reserved, and rarely makes jokes. However, when Marcus is with his friends, he is outgoing and loud. What is most likely causing the change in Marcus's behavior? This is a very important concept in ABA. It's what we often refer to as instructional control. We have instructional control. And what does instructional control mean? Well, it means when you're there in your presence, the behavior of your learner is different. It means they will listen to you. They're not engaging in all these maybe maladaptive behaviors. Maybe they're more compliant. All these ideas of what instructional control is simply what's occurring here. At work, Marcus is quiet, reserved, and rarely makes jokes. Why? Well, because at work, there's all these different stimuli which are altering Marcus's behavior, right? Maybe his boss, maybe it's HR, maybe it's his coworkers. All these stimuli are altering Marcus's behavior. But when he's with his friends, he's outgoing and loud. So his behavior is changing around his friends and at work. What's causing that? What's causing that is a stimulus control. Stimulus control is the same thing as instructional control. In the presence of certain stimuli, your behavior changes in frequency, it changes in magnitude, it changes in intensity. At work, Marcus's behavior is under the stimulus control of all these different contingencies, right? All these reinforcement contingencies, all these punishment contingencies. And as a result, it's quiet and reserved. When he's with his friends, being an outgoing and loud, is probably much more reinforced, right? At a much higher rate. Now his behavior is under all these other different types of contingencies. Stimulus control is taking place and affecting Marcus's behavior. It's why it's so important as RBTs you build rapport and attempt to gain instructional control. So that just means you have stimulus control. It's why some technicians, on some certain cases, have a much more difficult time with the client compared to maybe somebody else on the team. There's different stimulus control at play. Non-contingent reinforcement. Well, we're not talking about non-contingent reinforcement here. There's no reinforcement on the schedule. C, punishment. We're not sure what's maintaining these behaviors. We can maybe assume there's some sort of punishment contingencies at play, but we can't say for sure. And then D, antecedent interventions. No interventions are going on. We just know Marcus's behavior is under different control at work. He's quiet, reserved, rarely making jokes. But with friends, he's outgoing and loud. So stimulus control is at play, changing his behavior. Finally, what differential reinforcement procedure is usually recommended for a behavior that occurs at a high rate and is potentially harmful? Okay, we have a high rate behavior, meaning it occurs quite a lot, and it's potentially harmful, meaning we need to act immediately. When behavior is potentially harmful or it is harmful, sometimes we must do more drastic things, right? Because we have to really work to get it under control as soon as possible. So in this case, we're going to do whatever we can to try to start reinforcing other behaviors, right? We need to get other behaviors in its place of this potentially harmful behavior. Now, let's say it isn't potentially harmful and it's just high rate. So most common one I could think of is screaming. Kids who scream at a very high rate. We're talking, constantly throughout the day. Although maybe not harmful, it's still at a high rate. And so what we'll do is whenever they're not screaming, we reinforce. Let's say we have a potentially harmful behavior. Let's say we have some sort of scratching, right? Where the client is scratching their own skin. Well, if that's happening at a high rate, that is definitely potentially harmful. So what we would do is anytime they're not scratching, we reinforce. So when we are running a differential reinforcement procedure that involves reinforcing when a behavior isn't occurring, in the absence of behavior, we're reinforcing other behaviors. What is that called? A, DRI, differential reinforcement of incompatible behaviors. Well, we're not teaching a replacement here, okay? Because it's a high rate, it's potentially harmful. We just want to get it under control. So DRI and DRA are effective at teaching a particular replacement behavior, but they can be slower because we're working really hard to get that replacement behavior reinforced, not just extinction. But with DRO, we are reinforcing in the absence. So anytime this high rate, potentially harmful behavior isn't occurring, we'll be delivering reinforcement. We're not too worried about what we're reinforcing at this time. We just know we need to decrease this potentially harmful behavior. DRL is a different type. It's lower rates of behavior, systematically lowering how often it happens. We want to eliminate this behavior. But when you have behavior that are behaviors that are high rate and potentially harmful, often you'll be recommended a DRO because this is the quickest way to ensure we're reinforcing anything else, right? We just need to get anything else in there. We're not too worried about the replacement behavior. We just need to decrease this harmful behavior as soon as possible. All right, check out btexamreview.com for all of our study materials. When you pass, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. See you soon.